This week's big question is, what are some of your favorite like studio tricks, like backmasking or overlapping tracks, studio banter, hidden tracks? So for me, hidden tracks, I like those. Sometimes, you have to fast forward, like it's the CDs and stuff. You have to fast forward like a good 10 minutes in to get to it. But there's a They Might Be Giants album. I think it's Factory Showroom. And you rewind it at the first track and you can hear like a minute long song. And not many people, I guess more people know about it now. But back when it came out, a friend of mine figured it out. I thought that was kind of cool using that.
So the hidden track was at the beginning of the CD?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, so apparently there's like a track 0 on CDs, and I think sometimes you can keep like CD-ROM info on it.
They did that with the X-Files soundtrack. There was a hidden Nick Cave track. It was track 0.
Oh, cool. Yeah, there's a 9 Inch Nails album, Broken, that I have on CD that has 99 tracks. But there's really only like 6 songs on that, and then you gotta go all the way. As far as like backmasking, like I think there are some deliberate examples, but I think the whole like satanic thing is great. I found just from digging around, I found this great like 80s televangelist show with this guy playing Stairway to Heaven backwards, and it says some stuff and you're listening, you're like, wow. I also have a Smurfs record. The song's Space Smurfin'. When played backwards, they say Smurf the Beast and all hail Satan. And I couldn't find a YouTube clip of it, but I do have, like, when I found this, a friend of mine found it like 25 years ago, and we were freaking out about it. So I looped it and I put it in like a little song. I'll try to find a link. I think I put it on Bandcamp somewhere. Studio banter, I always like hearing people talk, like the Andy Warhol song by David Bowie. They like talking in the beginning of that. There's the Pixies album, Surfer Rosa, has a bunch, like where Kim Deal's talking about field hockey players at her school. And fading out, not always like a huge fan of it, but I really like this Monochrome set song called The Strange Boutique, because it does this part over and over and it fades out, and then like it starts fading back in and it gets loud again, and then it just kind of ends, and it's the last song on the album, so I just thought that was cool. And overlapping tracks, there's tons of examples of that, but one that I think is great for like the CD format was Melvins put out an album called The Maggot, and they split up the tracks of the songs in tracks. Like the first track plays for like a minute and it just cuts off, and then the second track starts. But if you're listening to it all the way through, you can't tell, but if you put it on shuffle, it kind of makes it sound crazy. Yeah, I think those are all my examples.
My favorite fade out has to be from Digital Underground, where they go, DJs, begin fading now. If you're not a DJ, we will do the fade out for you. Love that band. Underrated.
Yeah.
I love all these things about recordings, probably because I like being in the recording studio so much and making recordings. I like between song banter and, lots of other studio tricks. Some examples, I'll use our own, the Dead Milkmen Methodist coloring book, where when we recorded it, I was out in a warehouse part of the studio that wasn't soundproofed, and an airplane started flying over after the tape started rolling. And you can hear me say, there's an airplane overhead, and you guys say, catch it, keep it. And then I count in the song and we go into the song. And I actually made a little short video about this, which we'll provide the link to. And I show you an example of the serendipitous Led Zeppelin track that kind of matches up with ours. Another example that I like, there's a band called Spoon, and at the beginning of a song called Don't You Evah on their album Ga 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 Ga, the singer guitar player Britt Daniels asks Jim Eno, the drummer, who's also like the recording engineer on this track, to record the talkback mic, which is the microphone that's in the control room on the mixing console that you can press a button and talk to the people who are recording in the main studio room. And Britt wants him to record the audio from the talkback mic of Britt's voice coming through the speakers in the control room. And so you can hear what that sounds like at the beginning of this track. Another example, which is pretty subtle, but I like the sound of the tape machine kind of being switched on at the beginning of a song by a band actually that I recommended here on the show a couple months back. The band is called Global Charming, and the song is called My Turn to Sleep. We'll provide a link to that. Let's see. There's also, I mean, I'm also a fan of like using radio static and snippets of radio commentary, as well as samples of like dialogue and voices and stuff. And I've used these things on my own, music, which I have out on Bandcamp. And I actually did a series of videos called the Soundscapes a couple years ago, and I'll link to those on YouTube. If you listen to Soundscape 3, you'll hear some audio that were taken from a movie, from a sample pack. I'm a big fan of samplers. I've got 3 or 4 around me. So yeah, I like this kind of stuff because I think I like the recording process and everything, all the tricks and things that you can do in the studio.
I was like on the John Wayne album, the one that Mike Mark from Tex and the Horseheads turned me on to, where they recorded John Wayne, it's Jon Wayne, arguing with the producer, and I just played organ under it. It's really good. Okay, so first of all, thanks to everybody who sent me nice emails. I'm fine, but who watched last week's show and thought that I had gone off the deep end. No, I'm good. I'm good. That album had Stewart on it, which got me a lot of acting gigs. And my advice to everybody is, if you want acting gigs, record yourself doing some monologues. I'm fine. I'm good. I'm okay. I'm fine. Now that we move past that, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to use, as you can see, I'm in my lab coat, which means I'm in studio mode. I'm actually going to use this segment for those of you who record at home or go in the studio to give you a couple of tips. Now, I do have some visual aids with me, some props to maybe liven it up a little. But if that's not working, Joe will be splicing in shots from the 1979 NBC series Super Train. So, yeah, if it starts to get kind of dull, you'll see little stills from Super Train. All right, so let's talk about the 12-12 rule. This is something I used to think back in the day we thought everybody knew about, but it's one of those things that's sort of become forgotten. So let me get my guitar here. All right, so you see this fret here with 2 dots on it? That's your 12th fret. That's the one you go to when you play roundabout, which you shouldn't be doing. Okay, now this is a microphone. And what you want to do is, you want to take this. Now, the studio term for this is called a Peter meter. And you want to take your Peter meter and you want to make sure that your 12th fret, one with the 2 dots, is approximately 12 inches from the microphone. Okay, do that. You can place another mic wherever you want if you really want to do that. But you want to get that, because that will give you a really good sound. You know, your guitar might not be as sweet as this old gal, but if you use this mic placement trick, woo-hoo-hoo, your 6-string jazz box will sound prettier than a flock of songbirds high on black tar heroin. But yeah, that's the trick right there. So that's one I want to show you. Seriously, do not forget the 12. I'm being serious. 12-12 rule. 12th fret, 12 inches, or 12 inches is, I guess, 6 Ben Shapiro's. That's what we like to say. Hey, look, he can't satisfy his wife. I'm not the one who said it. So the other trick I want to show you, this is another one, and I'm actually talking into the mic, which isn't set up. We'll leave it here. This is one for you synth people out there. A lot of times, I create a lot of synth pads. I do them. I've been doing them forever, and I create these big swirly synth pads, and they're fine if they're on their own. But oftentimes, people will have me create one for them, and then I will say, okay, the song that you're using this in, is there like kick drum and bass in it? And they will say yes. And I'll say, okay, you might think that you're baking this beautiful musical entree, but you're just going to be making a sonic mud pie. The thing is that those pads will be competing with those low end sounds. So what you want to do is this: you want to get a high pass filter. Now this is a little workshop tool. You'll see it says high pass up here, and this is one of the backbones of my home studio. I use this thing for a lot. This is the core. What do we call this thing? Well, we call it like the NTS1. But it's a great little effects thing. And what I do is when I have a pad and I'm recording a bunch of stuff, I will run the pad into this through the effects, use the high pass filter, adjust it to where I like it, and then out. And it actually sounds really, really sweet in the mix, which is good, because if you're, like I say, I've heard some beautiful pads sound on their own. And then when you hear them in there with everything, you're like, this isn't good. As for things not to do in the studio, well, I guess the first one would be don't rent an accordion over a weekend so that one band member can use it exclusively. Probably not a good idea. But the other thing I'm going to recommend is I'm not a fan of vocal layering. Vocal layering works this way, and they often use it for verses, which is where I really don't like it. You sing the verse, and then you make 2 copies of that track. So the verse is sitting in the middle, you pan it right down the middle, and then you pan the other 2 ones slightly to the side. People, just because you have nearly unlimited tracks doesn't mean you have to use them. The reason, I was listening to the Cramps today. I was walking around looking at Halloween decorations and listening to the Cramps. And the reason those old records sound really good is because they're not using tons of tracks. We talked about the pad before, and Kate Bush, who is, considered to be a studio wizard, would layer like 100 different synths on and wonder why she couldn't hear different ones. So again, there's just certain things, just leave them as are. Sometimes, if you listen to old recordings, they would just get everybody to where they sounded good together and hang a mic down from the middle. Experiment with those recording techniques. That's the best thing you can do in the studio, really, is when you're, maybe bringing back some older techniques or experimenting with some new ones, but where you kind of go outside the box, as long as you use the 12 rule and you slap that high pass filter on your synth pads. So that's really and you got free tips today. So there you go.
I like all those tricks. Those are great ideas. And some other ones that I've used and had fun with in the past, at least in my own home recording, is making tape loops. Those are fun. Now, these days, it's just real easy to make a loop, I guess, electronically. But for some reason, to me, it was fun to just physically make a loop. And I would put them in, because I happen to have an 8-track tape player, which I still have. But you can take apart 8-track tapes, make the loops, record, and my 8-track would record, which was a bonus. Record it and pop it out after, it goes out once, and you have an automatic loop that you could do that over and over again. But combined with a 4-track, you can use it on multiple tracks, and then you can make another shell and make a different length, and you have different rhythm, different lengths, and you can create things that way. I like to do backwards anything, but a trick that the Dead Milkmen did was to put backwards, to flip the tape over. This is in the tape days, and put an effect on it backwards, then have that reversed, and you hear the effect in a backwards fashion. So, and usually you would get a pre version of whatever it was, a vocal or whatever it was, or a guitar. And now that's also really easy to do with on the digital realm. You don't have to flip things over. You just click a few buttons and you can do it.
We use the digital version of that trick on the new album on Melt Into the Night for the vocals.
Yeah, and it was so much easier than when we were flipping the whole 2-inch tape. Yeah, those are just a couple ideas. As for the actual medium tricks that happen, I like on records when they have locked grooves. That's another form of a loop. You don't see that too much, but when I come across it, it's pretty cool. And I had a couple records that had interlocking grooves, and one that played backwards from the in to the out.
I had the Monty Python one.
Yeah, that's
Was it
the
One
one.
Time
Sonic record. And
And
who was the band that had the song When the Roll is Called Down Under that had the locking groove at the end? So we just keep going. I always
that was Rancid Vat.
Rancid Vat. Yes, thank you, sir.
They did a cool locking groove.
Good call.
Town Managers had a locked groove on it.
And Pink Slip Daddy was the band that had their LSD 10-inch. It was so weird in so many ways. It played from the inside to the outside on one of the sides.
Great band.
You guys did some backmasking.
We did, yeah, we did backmasking on Bucky Fellini. We did on Beelzebub, and of course on Metaphysical Graffiti.
Yeah, I think at one point we say we're Beatrice, because that used to be a thing. We could say there's a company called Beatrice that owned everything. Yeah. They're not around anymore.
I forgot about that.
On the Atomic Fern.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for answering those questions. And for recommendations, I would like to recommend another song that I heard on WPRB, Princeton, New Jersey's only radio station, by a band called Tolerance, and the song is called Sacrifice. See, what I do if I hear a song, like if I stop, if I'm driving and I hear a song, I'll go at a red light, I'll go to the playlist, take a screenshot, and then like look it up later. I have tons of these screenshots, and but I was listening to it and I was like, wow, this is really cool. It's like, it sounded like lo-fi, like industrial music. But I just assumed it was like current because it was sandwiched by these other like more current sounding songs. Then I looked it up and it was a Japanese duo from like the late 70s. And I listened to the rest of the album and it was awesome. It's really cool. And it was a part of this thing called the Nurse with Wound list.
Yes, Nurse with Wound. Yes.
Yeah, which I didn't know much about. And then I looked into it and I was like, okay, there's some crazy stuff on there.
I'm a big Nurse with Wound fan. Yeah.
Yeah, so Tolerance is one of those bands. And then apparently the two, I didn't read too much into it, but it sounded like they vanished with the two members of the band. So just kind of adds to the mystique of it. But yeah, I would recommend, I've put a link for YouTube.
I would like to recommend the latest episode of a podcast called In Defense of SCA. And this latest episode features the drummer extraordinaire and friend of the band, John Worster, aka that Johnny Worster kid. You get a brief history of his music career and including some early Dead Milkmen stories. And of course, his love of ska music, which is pretty funny. And by the way, Joe, you did an interview with these folks a couple of weeks or a month or so back, right?
Yes.
Good episode as well. So these guys have a lot of musical knowledge, it seems, and ask some good questions. They've done their research, it sounds like. Anyway, so I recommend episode 142, In Defense of SCA, with John Worster.
And by the way, Pink Lady were also a Japanese duo, and they had their own show in the 70s or 80. It's kind of hard to remember. So that was on Dogs of 9000 today. They discussed Pink Lady and Jeff. All right, I'm getting off topic. All right, so let's get the spooky season stuff out of the way. A little bit of self-promotion, but then you'll get to hear some of my studio trickery. Over on my site is a new song and with a video called The Goatman Bridge. And it's put it out on October 1st, sort of a celebration of the Halloween season, getting everything going. And I'll have something out probably each week in December, or maybe for 3 weeks. No, October. That's what month it is. I don't care about December. So yeah, each week in October. So I think the next one will be like a circuit group box jam. But the song is called The Goatman Bridge because we love The Goatman Bridge. All right now it's time to get the impossible box out and randomly pick a horror movie for your October watching. Because let's face it, people, Dana Gould can't do this all by himself. He's not, sometimes a little kid will say, that man recommending horror movies isn't Dana Gould, Mommy. And the mom, you have to go, that's one of Dana Gould's helpers, Jimmy. All right, so the movie that I'm recommending this week is Dog Soldiers. Yeah. All right. Dog Soldiers is a werewolf movie starring Sean Pertwee. I don't know if you can see that. Something is pinged over there. Sean Pertwee. He's the son of John Pertwee, who was a Doctor Who. And this is about a bunch of, I guess you want to call them weekend soldiers or whatever, National Guard sort of type things over in Britain. And they're stationed up in Scotland. They have to do maneuvers and werewolves. So it's a really awesome film. I think you'll like it. Okay, and we're making a musical sandwich this week, so I want to go back to music. The other day, my son Walter came up to me, and he said, Dad, I'm picking up good vibrations. And I was like, listen, you're going to be picking up trash by the side of the road while you're wearing an orange jumpsuit if you keep listening to the Beach Boys, you son of a bitch. So what I did was I gave him the new album by Choke Chain. It's called Mortality, and it straightened his ass right out. So if you have kids, give them the new Choke Chain album is what I would recommend. It'll straighten them out. If anybody watching this is having, if your children aren't delinquents, give them the new Choke Chain album. One of the reasons I like Choke Chain is because I went to see them live, and it's really the project of one person, but he had a whole band with him. And he ran off stage with a chainsaw. And not like when you go to like what the JC's haunted house and the chainsaw doesn't have a chain in it. It had an actual chain in it. And he went chasing with me. So people always say to me, there's no more punk rock, but this is punk rock. So Mortality, the new Choke Chain album. So those are my recommendations.
I want to recommend a TV show that was on FX. It just recently ended. It's called Reservation Dogs. I'm only, I think, at the 7th episode, but there's like 28 total episodes now. But in case you don't know, it's a TV series about indigenous Americans, which centers on this group of teenagers growing up in Oklahoma. And I don't know, it's just really fun they have a lot of adventures, these kids, and it's fun to watch. So
and it's by the I think the producer, maybe created by the gentleman who did who created the movie What We Do in the Shadows. I always butcher his name, which is really weird because he's from New Zealand. But yeah, Vienna turned me on to that show. I loved. Seriously, you need to see Reservation Dogs.
It's on Hulu, and
yeah, it's on Hulu. Yeah.
It was on FX.
Well, I guess I'm just going to get my guitar out. And, when people get to fussing and a fighting and a feuding, I just take this old git fiddle and, I just sit by the railroad track, and it makes me feel a lot better because that's where all the drugs are. They throw them right off the train sometimes.
Bye.